Electra slighted Ivy, said 6 shocking words to her after learning verity. On a stormy autumn in Los Angeles, the pressure inside the satiny glass surfaces of the bold and the beautiful reached a breaking point as Electra Forrester eventually came face to face with the woman she formerly trusted like a family. The air inside Forrester Creations felt heavy, charged with secrets that had rotted for far too long. Word had just spread through the design house that Ivy Forrester's elaborate manipulation had been exposed, and the disclosure struck Electra harder than anyone anticipated. For weeks, subtle hints had refocused to someone snooping in her relationship with Will Spencer, someone feeding half-trueness, orchestrating misconstructions, and planting mistrustfulness where love formerly stood establishment. But Electra no way imagined the treason would trace back to Ivy, her own kinsman, someone who had offered comfort and guidance when effects with Will began unraveling. As the verity surfaced, thanks to Daphne's determined digging and Will's concession about strange exchanges Ivy initiated behind Electra's back, the pieces snapped together with ruinous clarity. Ivy had twisted Electra's precariousness, rumored falsehoods about Will's fidelity, and indeed offered hassles designed to fracture their bond. When Electra brazened the substantiation, textbook dispatches, manipulated emails, and a recording Daphne had captured, her world listed. The consummation wasn't just about a broken love. It was about a shattered trust that cut deeper than any heartache. Electra stormed into the design plant where Ivy stood reviewing fabric samples, her expression precisely composed as if nothing in the world could disturb her calm. Contrivers set mid-conversation, seeing the battle before a single word was spoken. Ivy looked up, startled by the fire in Electra's eyes. There was no vacillation, no polite preamble. The sting of Electra's hand echoed sprucely across the marble bottoms, as she slighted Ivy with a force born from treason. Gasps filled the room. Ivy staggered back, clinging her impertinence, shock flashing across her face. But it wasn't the poke that left everyone breathless. It was what Electra said next, her voice pulsing yet important. 6 words that sliced through the silence like a blade. You destroyed everything I believed in. The judgment hung in the air, raw and enduring. It wasn't just in blameworthiness. It was a protestation of heartache. Ivy's lips parted, searching for a defense, but none came snappily enough. Around them, the heritage of the Forrester family sounded to fluctuate under the weight of one woman's scheme. Electra's mind replayed every discussion she'd participated with Ivy, every tearful concession, every moment Ivy claimed she was only looking out for her. She flashed back Ivy suggesting that Will might still have passions for someone differently, intimating that his commitment was fragile. Electra had misdoubted herself, misdoubted Will, and indeed pushed him down during arguments sparked by Ivy's precisely planted dubieties. Now, standing in the bright plant lights, she understood the calculated atrocity behind those whispers. Ivy tried to speak, averring she had only wanted to cover Electra from getting hurt, that she believed Will would ultimately betray her. But her words chimed concave. Electra saw commodity differently now, covetousness, maybe resentment that Electra had set up happiness Ivy couldn't claim for herself. It wasn't protection. It was sabotage disguised as concern. Workers sluggishly filtered out of the room, leaving the 2 women locked in a charged standoff. Electra's breathing sustained, but her eyes remained blazing. She told Ivy that the worst part wasn't losing Will. It was realizing that someone she loved had manipulated her pain for particular gain. She reported how she nearly walked down from her dreams at Forrester Creations because she felt unworthy and distracted by emotional chaos Ivy had finagled. The treason strained into every corner of her life. Ivy's countenance cracked as she admitted she stressed being overshadowed again. Stressed that Electra's rising influence in the company and her high-profile love would leave her unnoticeable. The concession didn't soften Electra's resoluteness. Rather, it clarified the motive behind months of dishonesty. Meanwhile, word of the battle reached other family members. Rich Forrester and Steffi Forrester hastened toward the plant, stunned by what they were hearing. The Forrester name had survived innumerous dishonors, but treason within the family always cut the deepest. As they entered, they saw the fate, Ivy pale and shaken, Electra standing altitudinous but wounded. Electra didn't seek sympathy. She sought acknowledgement of the verity. She told them Ivy's conduct weren't a misreading, but a deliberate attempt to fracture her relationship and destabilize her confidence. Ridge's expression darkened as he demanded answers from Ivy, who plotted to justify choices that now sounded unpardonable. Steffi, fiercely defensive of her family's consanity, made it clear that trust, formerly broken, would not be fluently restored. Outside the structure, Will Spencer awaited anxiously after hearing rumors of the showdown. When Electra eventually stepped out, her expression was bent yet rueful. Will approached precisely, doubtful if he'd a place beside her after so important confusion. She looked at him with clearer eyes than she'd had in weeks. The fog Ivy created had lifted. She admitted she allowed mistrustfulness to pall her judgment, but she also conceded that manipulation played an important part. Will apologized for not fading Ivy's hindrance sooner. Together, they understood that rebuilding trust would take time, but at least now they faced the verity rather of murk. Back outside, Ivy set up herself decreasingly insulated. Family members questioned her judgment, associates avoided eye contact, and the formerly drinking halls of Forrester Creations felt colder than ever. The 6 words Electra delivered echoed relentlessly in her mind. "You destroyed everything I believed in." Ivy realized the damage extended beyond one relationship. It hovered her place in the family heritage. She tried to explain her jest, claiming fear and instability drove her conduct, yet each defense sounded weaker than the last. The battle forced everyone to defy uncomfortable realities about ambition, covetousness, and the fragile boundaries between love and contest. As evening fell over Los Angeles, the megacity lights reflected off the glass halls where drama had unfolded formerly again. Electra returned to her apartment, emotionally drained but strangely empowered. She had faced treason head-on and spoken her verity without vacillation. Though pain dallied, so did clarity. Ivy's deception no longer controlled her narrative. Rather, Electra chose to define herself by adaptability rather than heartache. The poke might have been impulsive, but the 6 shocking words were deliberate, a statement of tone respect that gestured she'd no longer be manipulated or lowered. In the days that followed, the ripple goods continued. Family meetings addressed the reproach, programs at Forrester Creations tensed, and Ivy's part within the company hung uncertainly in the balance. Yet amid the fallout, Electra's strength came apparent. She threw herself into her designs, channelizing emotion into creativity. Associates rallied around her, inspired by her courage to defy treason intimately. Indeed, as rumors swirled and gossip columns buzzed, Electra's countenance remained steady. She understood that dishonors fade, but integrity endures. The battle between Electra and Ivy came one of those indelible moments etched into the history of the bold and the beautiful. A scene fueled not by spectacle alone, but by raw mortal emotion. It was a memorial that in a world of glamour and high fashion, the deepest injuries come from broken trust. Electra's 6 words reprised a continuance of assignments about fidelity and tone worth. And though the future remained uncertain with connections to mend and reports to repair, one thing was clear: Electra Forrester had reclaimed her voice. The poke was a spark, but her protestation was the honey that illuminated the verity for everyone to see. The fallout from that explosive battle on the bold and the beautiful didn't fade overnight. In fact, the 6 words Electra hurled at Ivy, "You destroyed everything I believed in," came the emotional twinkle of the entire week in Los Angeles. They echoed through Forrester Creations like a warning bell, forcing everyone to reevaluate commitment, hypotheticals, and the fragile line between family and contest. The morning after the poke, Forrester Creations felt constitutionally quiet. Sidekicks rumored in corners, seamsters changed conservative ganders, and directors dallied longer than usual outside closed doors. Electra arrived beforehand, determined not to let reproach define her. She stepped off the elevator with her head grandly, dressed in a structured ivory blazer that imaged her new resoluteness. Though her heart still pained, she refused to appear broken. She walked past the design boards Ivy formerly stood beside and felt the sting of treason each over again, but this time it stoned her focus rather of weakening her. Ivy meanwhile had slightly slept. The imprint of Electra's hand had faded from her impertinence, but the demotion had not. She replayed the scene constantly. The shock in the staff's eyes, Ridge's disappointment, Steffi's cold silence. She told herself she no way meant for effects to helical so far. In her mind, she had been guarding herself from fading into impertinence. Electra's rising success, her love with Will, and her growing influence in the company had touched off precariousness Ivy allowed. She had buried times agone. But instability didn't excuse deception, and deep down Ivy knew that. When Electra entered the main design room, exchanges stopped. She took a steadying breath and addressed the platoon directly. She assured them that the particular drama would not intrude with the forthcoming couture line. Her voice was calm but firm. She refused to let Ivy's manipulation ail months of hard work. The platoon responded with quiet nods, relieved that someone was anchoring the chaos. That moment marked a subtle shift. Electra was no longer the vulnerable kinsman seeking guidance. She was a leader reclaiming control. Latterly that autumn, Ridge requested a private meeting with both women. The atmosphere in the administrative office was tense, heavy with implied history. Ridge's expression reflected further sadness than wrathfulness. He spoke about heritage, about how the Forrester name had survived dishonors, battles, indeed commercial sabotage, but internal treason always cut the deepest. Ivy tried to explain her fear of being overshadowed, her belief that Will might ultimately hurt Electra. She claimed her intentions were defensive, indeed if her styles were bloodied. Electra heeded quietly, arms crossed, absorbing every word without interruption. When it was her turn to speak, Electra didn't raise her voice. She explained how Ivy's whispers had eroded her confidence, how she had begun questioning her instincts and her worth. She described nights spent distrusting Will's fidelity, because Ivy planted seeds of dubitation. She spoke about the shame of realizing she had been manipulated by someone she trusted. The room fell silent again, not from shock this time but from recognition. Ivy's conduct weren't minor mistakes, they were deliberate deformations that reshaped someone's emotional reality. Ridge made it clear that trust within the company was non-negotiable. While he stopped suddenly of immediate termination, he blazoned that Ivy would be removed from cooperative systems involving Electra. The decision was strategic but emblematic. Ivy would no longer have direct influence over her kinsman's professional path. It was a boundary drawn not out of revenge but necessity. Outside the commercial world, Will Spencer plotted with guilt. He met Electra that evening at a quiet eatery overlooking the megacity. The pressure between them was different now, lower confusion, further clarity. He admitted that he tasted commodity was out during Ivy's private exchanges with him, but dismissed it as inoffensive concern. Electra confessed she allowed fear to stamp trust. They both conceded that manipulation thrives in silence, and they had each remained silent too long. The discussion wasn't about rejuvenating love incontinently. It was about rebuilding honesty from the ground up. As days turned into a week, public whispers spread beyond Forrester creations. Fashion bloggers suspected about internal drama. Rival companies watched nearly, hoping insecurity might weaken the Forrester conglomerate. Yet rather of collapsing, the company sounded to rally. Electra unveiled an exercise of her newest collection, a line inspired by adaptability and revitalization. Structured outlines paired with delicate fabrics represented strength arising from vulnerability. Critics praised the emotional depth in her designs, ignorant of how particular the alleviation truly was. Ivy, observing from the sidelines, felt the full weight of consequences. Insulation crept into her diurnal routine. Associates who formerly sought her input now avoided prolonged discussion. Assignations to strategy sessions downscaled. She began to understand that treason doesn't just fracture connections. It reshapes perception. She could no longer control the narrative through subtle manipulation. The verity had stripped her influence bare. One evening, Ivy approached Electra in the empty design plant. The structure lights were dim, casting long murk across drafting tables. There were no substantiations this time, no dramatic followership. Ivy apologized, not defensively, not with defense but with quiet sincerity. She admitted covetousness clouded her judgment. She conceded that her fear of losing applicability drove her to produce chaos. Electra heeded precisely. The reason didn't abolish the history, but it marked a shift. For the first time, Ivy didn't hide behind defenses. Electra responded courteously. Remission, she said, was immediate. Trust needed rebuilding slip-up by slip-up. She explained that healing meant boundaries and responsibility, not pretending nothing happened. Ivy jounced, understanding that conciliation would be slow and uncertain. Still, the discussion softened commodity rigid between them. Meanwhile, Steffi observed these developments nearly. She respected Electra's countenance and adaptability. In a private discussion, she told Electra that leadership frequently emerges through adversity. She reminded her that strength isn't measured by avoiding pain, but by defying it openly. The stimulant corroborated Electra's newfound confidence. As the coming fashion show approached, expectation filled the air. The runway event would be the first major public appearance since the reproach. Journalists suspected about pressure confidentially, eager for signs of disharmony. Rather, what they witnessed was consinity, not forced or artificial but steady. Electra walked the final runway bow alongside the design platoon, radiating assurance. Ivy remained behind the scenes, recognizing the professional distance established by Ridge. It was a quiet acknowledgement of consequences without spectacle. The followership erupted in applause, praising the collection's emotional intensity. Critics latterly described it as one of the most authentic lines Forrester creations had produced in times. For Electra, the applause represented further than career success. It represented reclaiming control over her narrative. In private moments she still grappled with moping hurt. Treason leaves echoes long after justifications are spoken. She journaled late at night, recycling recollections of exchanges she now understood else. But rather of allowing remorse to consume her, she used reflection as growth. She honored her own part in ignoring suspicion, in allowing mistrustfulness to mold. Tone mindfulness came her quiet power. Ivy, too, began defying uncomfortable trueness about herself. She sought comforting to address the precariousness that fueled her manipulation. For the first time, she examined patterns of comparison and resentment that had followed her for times. Growth wasn't dramatic or public. It was slow and internal. Months latterly, the pressure between the relatives had cooled into conservative civility. They banded minimally but hypercritically. Trust hadn't completely returned, but hostility had faded. The 6 shocking words that formerly shattered the room now served as a turning point. A memorial of how snappily trust can fracture, and how designedly it must be rebuilt. In the broader shade of the bold and the beautiful, the battle came iconic not because of the poke itself, but because of what followed. It explored the psychology of covetousness, the consequences of manipulation, and the adaptability of someone determined not to be defined by treason. Electra's protestation wasn't simply wrathfulness. It was recovery. She had drawn a line, demanded responsibility, and refused to let deception rewrite her identity. Los Angeles continued to glimmer under its endless evenings, and Forrester creations continued to thrive amid contest and love. Yet within those glass walls, a quiet metamorphosis had taken place. Electra was no longer the woman distrusting her worth because of rumored falsehoods. She was the mastermind of her own confidence, forged through battle and clarity. And Ivy, lowered but introspective, understood that redemption was possible only through sustained honesty. The path forward was uncertain, but it was real, erected not on vision but verity. In the end, the poke was a spark, the 6 words were a reckoning, and the fate was growth. In true bold and the beautiful fashion, love, ambition, treason, and remission intertwined, reminding everyone that indeed in a world of glamour, the most important metamorphoses be within the mortal heart. The weeks following the battle between Electra and Ivy marked a subtle but profound shift in the dynamics at Forrester Creations. Electra, formerly conditional and uncertain, moved through the office with a quiet authority. Indeed, associates who had preliminarily treated her with patronizing concern now approached her with genuine respect. She became the voice of reason during design controversies, the steady hand guiding inferior contrivers, and the emotional anchor for musketeers navigating their own particular dramatizations. The 6 words she had delivered to Ivy, "You destroyed everything I believed in," resounded not just as a statement of hurt, but as a protestation that Electra would no longer allow manipulation to define her life. Ivy, on the other hand, remained in the shadow of her conduct. She was no longer an bigwig in Electra's particular or professional affairs. Every commerce reminded her of the line she had crossed. Indeed, when Ridge and Steffi offered conservative guidance, it was clear that remission would not abolish the consequences. Ivy's attempts to recapture footing within the company were measured. She heeded further than she spoke, contributed only when her input was solicited, and sluggishly began to examine the precariousness that had led her down such a destructive path. In her quiet moments, she reflected on the damage her covetousness had caused, both to her relationship with Electra and to her own sense of tone worth. Electra, meanwhile, poured her energy into creation and collaboration. She worked late into the gloamings, sketching designs inspired by adaptability, strength, and redemption. Each piece she produced sounded invested with the assignment she had learned about trust, honesty, and the courage it takes to defy treason. Will's steady presence in her life came a source of consolation, though their relationship remained precisely measured, erected on translucency rather than eyeless trust. Their relations were gentle but deliberate, a reconditioning process.